father beat the hell out of me. All it did was make me fantasize about the day I could murder him.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, my name is Justin Stubbs, and I'm in the band Father Befouled.
And Justin, how would you describe the music of Father Befouled?
I mean, the easiest way to put it is that we're a death metal band. I don't like to add any different, old school death metal or dark death metal. We're just a death metal band. And I like to play death metal that I grew up listening to. So we're a death metal band.
Now, as far as death metal that you started off listening to, do you want to mention who that might be?
So ground zero for me was Morbid Angel back in the 90s. It's funny, I was probably 12 years old, and somebody gave me a mixtape, and this would have been around 93 or 94, right around the time Covenant came out. They gave me a mixtape, and it had like Iron Maiden on it, and Danzig, and Soundgarden, and Nirvana, and Black Sabbath. But at the end of the tape on side B, and it was full, it was probably, 30 songs. At the end of the tape was God of Emptiness by Morbid Angel. And it was just unlike anything I had ever heard before. And I just kept listening to it over and over again. But it also it scared me. It was evil sounding, and I felt like I shouldn't be listening to it. It was scary, and I was just obsessed. So ground zero was Morbid Angel. And then from there, I studied everything I could. Cannibal Corpse, Deicide, Obituary, Monstrosity, and just went from there.
So we don't need to add any other labels to Father Befouled besides death metal. And I think everyone is in agreement that you guys represent the genre pretty well. But if you had to describe your sound in terms of emotions, what emotions would Father Befouled conjure, to use a Morbid Angel appropriate term?
So we have a dark atmosphere. I think that we have kind of an ethereal sound. I like having a lot of texture and there's like a cacophony to our music. I want our music to kind of suffocate the listener. There's definitely like, when we're playing our songs and writing our songs, there's a mindset, there's a mood there. And I want to convey that mood through the music. So it's not negative, but it's the music for me is very cathartic. I'm able to express emotions through Father Befouled that I can't just express in everyday conversation. I'm real passionate about the stuff that I write about, but I'm trying to also paint a picture for the listener through the lyrics and the sound. It all goes together. And we're not the type of band where you're going to, sit down and sing along to the words. But if you read the lyrics and listen to the music, I want it to paint kind of this nightmarish picture in your brain of what I'm trying to express. So, we're definitely dark. We're dense. We're atmospheric. And again, back to the suffocating. I want it to be kind of just the suffocation of sound when you're listening to our music.
Now, in terms of that feeling, suffocating sound, the cacophonous sound, how much of that is purely note selection and how much of that is also the way that your music is recorded and produced and engineered, etc.?
It starts with the way we write. I mean, there are definitely things that we avoid when I'm writing songs. I mean, everything's very chromatic. It's very dissonant. There's not a lot of major chords. It's all minors. And when I'm writing, I'm definitely like, I stick to the same kind of intervals in the music, my chord progressions and my note progressions. And I try to find stuff that makes the music sound eerie and morbid and angular. I don't want it to be obvious. I don't want it to be predictable. I'm a self-taught guitar player. I don't know anything about music. So when I'm writing songs, I can't tell you like what scale it is or anything like that. And I think that owes a lot to our music, that it's kind of, it comes from a different place. And when I'm writing, I can definitely tell real quick, like, what project or band or sound it's going to work for. And there's a definite set of lines with Father Befouled that I color inside of when I'm writing music. And then on the recording side, I mean, with this record, we tried to capture the best recording we could for the style of music, but it's still dark and it's still dreary sounding. And that's owed a lot to the way we write, the way we tune, the equipment we use. But we really made a pointed effort to capture the best recording we could. And it's definitely the best production job we've ever had as far as the mixing and mastering goes. So we spent more time, more attention to detail with the recording of this record than we've ever done before.
And we'll definitely speak in more detail about how this latest album was recorded. Back to your songwriting for a little bit. Do you have to be in a specific place emotionally or in a specific state of mind to create music for Father Befouled?
Yes and no. Like, I'm kind of a weird guitar player. I don't just sit down and play guitar to play guitar. I usually play guitar because I have something I'm trying to accomplish. But I avoid writing Father Befouled songs on a regular basis because I don't want to. I want our songs to mean. I don't want to have a lot of filler. I mean, I could sit here all day long and write 10 Father Befouled songs, but they're not going to have the effort put into them that they would otherwise. I mean, I will spend months writing songs where I will write a riff and I will sit on it, and then I'll figure out a riff from that riff, and then I'll put them together and I'll sit on it, and eventually it all comes together into a song. And then we take that as a group and we mold it and rehearse it and change it and add to it and take away from it. But I definitely have to, I guess I have to be in a place to write songs. I have other bands that I play in, I have other projects that I work on, and that keeps me from being in Father Befouled mode all the time. So I definitely, I wait until I know that there's something that I need to be working on, and I'll start getting kind of in that Father Befouled mode. It also owes to like what I listen to. If I'm listening to a lot of death metal, it's going to make me want to write death metal. And there's definitely times when like I will avoid like listening to certain bands because I don't want to write songs right now. I don't want to have that influence. So I will change kind of like what I'm listening to at the time. That may sound weird, but it all goes hand in hand with each other. So,
and as far as the slower passages go, are you listening to death metal? Does death metal inspire that as well? Or are there other forms of music that you listen to?
No, I mean, that's the slower stuff is born out of that same kind of death metal. You know, all of the bands that I like, I mean, I love hundreds of death metal bands, but bands that really influence our sound, like Immolation and Incantation and Morbid Angel, they all have slower passages. And it just, when I'm writing a song, I can tell where it's going to go. And there's always a point where like it has to slow down. And it's all about creating a feeling and creating an atmosphere. And it's just this inherent thing when I'm writing. I just know what I want to do with it. So
now, do songs always start with a riff for you?
Generally, yeah. I'm bad about, I write lyrics at the very end. Now, if something pops in my head or if I'm influenced by something, I will definitely like write it down. I keep a folder on my phone where I type out lyric ideas. But then like with this record, it wasn't until the songs were written and we were rehearsing them before I sat down and finished all of the lyrics. And I tend to do that really quickly. And I definitely have to be in a certain mood, a certain mode to write lyrics. But in all of our songs, they come from the same place. And they're kind of, it's not that our songs, like our albums, are a concept or a story, but it's all narrative and it all works around the same concept, I guess you could say. I mean, I could probably take all of my lyrics and put them together and make a story out of it. But it always starts with a riff. It always starts with, just comes out of, I'll hear something like, I really like that riff. I want to, I want to do something in that style, or I'll get a melody stuck in my head, or I'll just be playing guitar and something will come out. It's like, oh, I like that. And I'll work on it. But I'm the world's worst guitar player. Like if I sit down and record something or sit down and play something and don't record it, I won't remember it the next day. So as soon as a riff happens or a couple of riffs happen, I set up my phone and I record myself playing it so I can remember it. So I have just dozens and dozens of these little snips of me playing guitar on my phone so I can remember all of these riffs.
And how much input do the other members have in terms of riffs, song structure, arrangements, things like that?
They have some, and it's not that I keep them from having it, but it all starts with me. The way we did this record is Amos and myself, the drummer, we both live in the Atlanta area, so we're close. And the other two guys live down in South Georgia, so they're a few hours away. So we can't always get together, all four of us. But as soon as I had the first song done, me and Amos got together and we worked on it, and we worked out all of the parts, and we rehearsed it like that for a little while. And then, and I always record us practicing. So I would take that video of us practicing and I'd listen back to it and watch it and listen to it and go, okay, I want to change this. Something's not working for me. There's a weird transition, or, that riff doesn't sound the way I thought it sounded now that I'm hearing it back. So I'll rewrite something. And then, when I get in front of the drummer, something that may work in my head doesn't work for him. It's got a weird timing or something like that. So we'll change it to fit the song. And we've always changed stuff for the better. We've never changed a song and me be like, oh, I wish we hadn't have done that. But Amos is a very intuitive drummer. He's a very, very eclectic drummer. He's great with weird timings that I write in. Like I said, I'm not a trained guitar player, so I write stuff in odd time signatures, and he always picks up on it. But then we take those recordings and those demos that we make, and I send them to the other two guys. And I say, listen, any input you have, I'm all for it. So they had some input and some changes and some things, and the two of them really add texture to the song. So Derrik, the other guitar player, he helps a lot with adding harmonies and melodies and alternate parts and leads and solos. And then our bass player, Reese, it's funny, the two of them, they both teach guitar lessons. They're both extremely accomplished musicians that know everything there is to know about the instrument. So they can take my songs and they know what key it's in, and they know what the scale is, and they know what the chords and the modes are. And they can help me fix things that may not go right. Or they'll tell me, hey, you're playing it here and here, but it's the same note if you play it here, and it makes it easier to play. And they help out a lot when it comes to that. And then Derrik, our guitar player, he recorded the album and mixed it. So there was a lot of help there. He knew the songs just backwards and forwards as well as I did by the time we were done with this. So, but they didn't write any songs. They definitely wrote parts, and Derrik wrote a lot of harmonies and melodies for this record. But if you go back to like Desolate Gods, they wrote a couple of songs on it. They each wrote complete songs on the Holy Rotten Blood EP. So it's never, the band's not a dictatorship. I always want them to have as much input as they can, as they want to. So
when you bring songs to the band, how complete are they? Are you bringing in riffs as you're writing them, or do you have the arrangements more or less done and demoed before the rest of the band hears them?
The arrangements are done before I go to the drummer. It's always me to the drummer first. And it's always going to, most of the time it's going to be a complete song. It's going to be a complete set of riffs that are together, and I'm playing them in a certain way. There's been times where I've gotten with Amos and been like, okay, I've got this riff, and this riff that I really like together. Let's work on something. And then we'll write together. But most of the time the arrangement is there, and then it may be changed, but most of the time we have an arrangement as we go in to start rehearsing it.
mentioned that all your lyrics could come together to form a complete narrative. Is there an overarching theme to Father Befouled, the way that a band like Nile or maybe Deicide had kind of their own themes to their music?
Yeah, I mean, the overall kind of theme to our music is I have a strong aversion to religion. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God or any of that, but I also am very, very critical of it. And the whole vibe of everything I've ever written has kind of been a mockery of religion. And kind of the way, Deicide was always a mockery of religion, but it was much more lowbrow in their delivery. Whereas I write, it's all metaphorical and allegorical and it's like it's kind of abstract, the way an abstract painter paints a picture that, it looks like a person and, you get up close and it's a big jumbled mess. But it's all about the assumed destruction of Christianity. Now I write songs about, the end of heaven, and I don't necessarily glorify evil in my music because I think that the glorification of evil is just as absurd as the glorification of religion, of God. But it's just a mockery of Christianity, basically, to put it in a nutshell.
May I ask where that comes from? Because I grew up in a very religious Catholic household. And so, when you have that stuff forced down your throat and then, at like 14 or 15, you discover Deicide and Slayer, obviously it becomes this kind of release that you're looking for.
Yeah. So I grew up in a Baptist household, more specifically Southern Baptist, which is a little more strict. I didn't grow up in a strictly religious upbringing, but we were in church all the time. I have a very religious grandmother. I'm very close with her. She doesn't like, that I'm not religious and that I'm very anti-religious. But, I saw that it was just my parents. I love my parents to death, but they went to church because they felt like they had to, because, it was going to make them better by going to church every Sunday, even though they didn't live these Christian lives. And then same thing, I went to church. I studied the Bible. I thought that, I told myself that I had faith. And then I was like 13, 14, 15 years old. And I was like, this is all just kind of bullshit. And if you look at the Bible, if you go back, 2,000 years, you go back 2,100 years, and from when the Bible was first supposedly written, there's a gap. There's a point to where you're like, okay, that's not real. There's no way that was real. But then people, theologians and scholars, they have filled in the gaps on their own, and it's just made up. And I saw through that veil when I was a child, when I was a teenager, and I'm so adverse to it because I see how much it just annoys me to see people put so much trust in something that's, to me, is obviously fake. And they base their entire being and their lives around this thing that, to me, doesn't exist. And when I woke up to that and stopped being afraid of what was going to happen to me when I die, it brought a calm to me. And I mean, that happened when I was like 16 years old. And I've developed that over the years. I mean, I'm in my 40s now. So it's easy for me to not believe in God, to not be a Christian. I don't worry about what's going to happen if I die. For me, it's just going to be lights out. I'm not worried about going to hell because I don't believe that hell exists. And it's something that I have a really deep conviction about, but I don't talk about it. It's, I always try to avoid those religious conversations with people like at work or with other friends that don't understand it, because they're always just going to assume that, you're an idiot, you're wrong, I'm right. And I just avoid those kind of conversations, which I could quote scripture to them all day long. I understand the Bible probably better than a lot of these people, but to me, it's not real. And I think it's sad that so many people put so much stock in it when it's just obvious to me that it's not real. So,
between the time of those first two albums, the old school death metal revival had started. There was also the sound, not necessarily based in one location or one style, but bands that were doing something a little bit similar to what you guys were doing in terms of this suffocating kind of atmospheric style. Cruciamentum is kind of like that. Mm-hmm. Portal was kind of like that. You mentioned Decrepitaff, who you guys did a split with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any of these bands were really aware of each other or influenced by each other in terms of what they were doing. But did you realize that there were like minds out there that?
Yeah. So definitely, I saw when we started, shortly after we started and started to have kind of a MySpace presence, Cruciamentum came along. I said, okay, they're definitely doing the same vein. Dead Congregation had already put out a couple of things at that point. They're a little bit older than us. I think Dead Congregation got started around 2004. And I really saw that with Dead Congregation. I saw it with Necros Christos. Ignivimus from Australia was doing the same thing. So I definitely started to see there was like minds out there. But I mean, even if you go back, like the band from Mexico, Dominus Zul, they were doing incantation worship in the late 90s. Incrust from Brazil put out a record that sounds like incantation in the 90s. There were definitely bands doing that. But with the advent of social media and this younger generation coming in around 2005, 2006 with MySpace, you saw a lot. It was just easier to access it. But, definitely, like, as soon as we started to gain some steam, I saw other bands doing the same thing. And those bands today, we're all friends. It's funny, like Cruciamentum, Dead Congregation, Ignivimus, we're all friends and have all played shows together and have all kept in contact over the years. So, but no, I definitely saw that all happening at once.
Now, did you feel like you were part of a movement? Or, I mean, you mentioned that you knew people in the other bands and you actually worked with a few of them. Did you feel like it was, something like what had happened with Slam or even some of the more blast beat oriented bands, like maybe 10 years prior?
If I think back now, Incantationcore became a thing 10 years ago. And when people mention that, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but you can't mention that without mentioning my band. And I feel like us and Dead Congregation and Cruciamentum, we were definitely at the forefront of that dark death metal sound. Also like Funebrarum from New Jersey, which they date back to the late 90s. They were doing dark and morbid death metal back then. Disma came along the same time we did, which is members of Incantation and Crucium and Funebrarum. But I definitely think we were part of that, the foundation of that resurgence. I'd like to think that anyway. I'd like to see our name mentioned alongside those names in the annals of death metal history. So.
let's jump to the present. Can you say the name of the latest Father Befouled album?
Crowned in Veneficum.
See, that's why I didn't want to say it. let me give it a shot. Crowned in One more time. Crowned in Veneficum.
Yeah, it's either Veneficum or Veneficum. It translates to poisonous or poison or of a poison. So back, 20 years ago, I guess, there was a black metal band from Chicago called Veneficum. And they were like an emperor sounding, lots of keyboards, lots of riffs. They were fucking sick. They only put out like one EP, I think. But I always loved that EP, and I've always liked that word, Veneficum. There's a newer band now. I think they're on Iron Bonehead called Veneficum, but I've always said Veneficum. It's funny. I saw Veneficum play one time in Chicago, and they opened for Incantation. But
full circle.
Yeah. It's also funny. Are you familiar with Demonic Christ?
Not really. No.
Okay. Well, Demonic Christ, they're a black metal band. They're kind of a black death metal band, but their main person is Dana Duffy. She was in the death metal band Mythic in the 90s.
Ah, yeah.
But Dana lives here in Atlanta, and I see her at shows all the time. Well, Demonic Christ played a show, and we were talking, and then I was talking to her drummer, and it turns out that her drummer was the singer of Veneficum. And I was like, holy shit, you were in Veneficum. He was like, no one has ever gotten excited about Veneficum. I was like, I fucking love that EP. So that was pretty funny. But so yeah, Veneficum, that's what I say. Veneficum. It kind of, so the title is like crowned in poison, poisonous crown, something like that. So, and to me, it's an allegory, a metaphor to the crown of thorns.
Crowned in Veneficum. I'm going to have to practice that a few times. Crowned in Veneficum was released on March 25th through Everlasting Spew Records.
Yep.
Tell me about the creation of this album, how it started, and what your intentions were going into this album.
I'll jump back a little bit. 2018, Wayne was still in the band. Jake had left years ago. Jake was in the band for a few years, but Reese joined in 2015. So it was me, Wayne, Reese, and Derrik. And we had played several shows. We'd been on tour. Well, then I was talking with the organizer of Maryland Death Fest, which we had played at one point, about playing the Netherlands Death Fest. So he said, yeah, let's bring you over to play Netherlands Death Fest. So I brought that up to Wayne, and Wayne was said, like, I don't want to travel overseas. Wayne lives in California, so we were doing it super long distance at this point and had done so for years. But he said, I don't want to travel overseas. He's like, I will bow out. You go ahead and find a new drummer that can do that for you. And I already knew Amos. Amos lives here in Atlanta. Amos had filled in for Wayne for an Incantation gig at one point. So we were already jamming together. And I said, hey, I want you to join Father Befouled as well. And he jumped on it. So we immediately started jamming. He started learning the set. And we played a couple of shows here in Atlanta as warm-ups. And then we decided that we needed to have a release to take with us to Europe. Playing Netherlands Death Fest turned into us doing a tour in Europe. We did a week in Europe. It's all we could manage with our work schedules. So we didn't have time to write and record an album, but I said, let's do an EP. So we very quickly wrote Holy Rotten Blood. And I only wrote 3 of the songs. Reese wrote 1 and Derrik wrote 1. So we put that together. We recorded it ourselves, had it mixed and mastered, blah, blah, blah. And it came out. And actually, we had the copies drop shipped to us at the first venue in Germany. So when we arrived in Germany for the first show, our CDs were waiting on us. Did that tour, came home. That was in April, May of 19. We didn't do anything for the rest of the year. And then COVID hit in March. Well, in December of 2019, we recorded the split with Exalgerate. And that had been in the works for the last half of that year, we've been talking about doing that. So Dark Descent put out Holy Rotten Blood, and then we were working with Rotted Life to do the split 7-inch. We recorded that, sent it off, and then COVID delayed everything. Rotted Life ended up sitting on that split for months. Not any fault of their own, but Rotted Life is great. I love that label. I love Jason. Everlasting Spew approached us just out of the blue one day on Facebook. Got a message from them. I said, we are planning to do a new record, hopefully by 2022. I had some like riffs, like in their infant stages, working on some songs. We didn't have any shows planned because of COVID. And I said, we're going to put it out with Dark Descent again. And that was it. We didn't speak for several months. And then I ended up having a couple of issues, and I reached back out to Everlasting Spew and I said, hey, if we decided to work with you, what would, could we do that? And we just started talking and we went from there. And I decided to go with Everlasting Spew. And then for all of 2021, we wrote and rehearsed this record. We spent more time on Crowned In Veneficum than anything else. Probably more time on that record than the other records combined. We wrote and rehearsed and really, really molded those songs into what they became. And then we went in and recorded the drums first in June of 21. We recorded the drums locally at a studio here in Atlanta. And this is the first time that we entered a real studio ever for this band. We've always recorded everything on our own, but we did the drums in a studio here in Atlanta. And then Derrik, throughout the pandemic, had started his own music engineering path, and he has built quite the home studio for himself. So we decided to do the rest of the record with him. So we recorded all of the guitars in July and August, and then did the vocals in like August, September, somewhere in there, did the bass, and then did the mixing and mastering, and we sent it off to the label end of the year, somewhere December, somewhere in there. So it was quite the process.
So am I understanding the timeline right? March to June of 2021 is how long you were writing the album?
No, we wrote the album. So March of 2020.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sometime in 2020, me and Amos started rehearsing the songs one by one. And then in 2021, we started even more, rehearsing every couple of weeks, working the songs out, recording them. And then we went in and recorded the record over this past summer.
Okay.
So
I got you. In terms of the writing process specifically for this album, we spoke extensively about how you create songs for Father Befouled, but do you have any specific intentions for this album to do anything differently or to focus on various aspects of your sound?
I want, with everything we've ever done, I've wanted to progress a little bit. And I think that at this point in our career, Father Befouled has its own sound. Yeah, we sound like Incantation. There's a big Incantation influence there. But I know that when I'm writing songs, what parts are Incantation influenced and what aren't. There's a lot of Morbid Angel on this record. There's a lot of Dead Congregation on this record. There's a lot of Immolation on this record. But there's a lot. It's a Father Befouled record. Our record sounds like Father Befouled. We have our own sound. But more than anything, I always want every record to have texture and nuance and things that you may not pick up the first time you listen to it. There's multiple guitar tracks in places. There's multiple harmonies and melodies in places.
They're little strange ethereal sounds kind of creeping into.
Exactly. And, I don't want, like I said earlier, there's definitely lines that I color inside of with Father Befouled. There's things that there's techniques I'm never going to write with in Father Befouled, but there's always going to be progression. There's solos all over this record. And if you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have never cared about having solos on the record. Even though, There's solos on Morbid Destitution. There's solos on Revulsion. But we really, really made a marked effort to write the solos. And I have half the solos in this record, which I've never played solos on our record. It's always been Derrik. But that's just, I have developed as a guitar player, and I really appreciate a slow, despondent sounding lead now. And all of mine are angular and slow and weird sounding because I don't know how to fucking play the guitar correctly. But anything that sounds like that it makes sense, that's Derrik. But I wanted to progress our sound as much as we can and still stay inside of that Father Befouled envelope. You know, I want it to be better than the last. I want it to be fresh sounding, but I don't want it to sound like a new band. I don't want it to sound like, you know, oh, well, what are they doing? This doesn't sound right. But I don't want to keep rehashing the same thing over and over again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like I said earlier, Mortician is one of my favorite bands of all time. And they haven't put out a record since 2004. But when they finally put out a new record, it's going to sound exactly like the last one sounded in 2004. Mortician's never going to change. And that's great. I don't want them to change. But, you know, I don't want to progress so much that the core of Father Befouled changes, the core sound.
guitarist Derrik handled a lot of the engineering and mixing duties on this album. Has Derrik been involved in the production of previous albums?
Nope, this was it. So a little bit about Derrik. I love him to death, and he won't mind me saying this. Derrik had a crippling alcohol problem until July of last year, July of 2020. He's almost 2 years sober. So he got sober in 2020 during the pandemic. And he took all of that energy that he would otherwise not use by just drinking all the time, and he put it into learning how to write and record, or how to record music. And he took the money that he was spending on alcohol every day and put it into building a studio. And he has a legit home studio now. And he's putting himself through school for music engineering. But I've been recording music and producing music on my own for 20 years. And in 6 months, he had already eclipsed what I was capable of. He's one of the smartest people I know. He's one of the most intuitive people I know. And he's one of those people that can just sit down and learn something really, really easily. And he has just excelled. Well, he's a music nerd for one. I mean, he understands music better than anybody I know. But he has just so excelled in music production and engineering and mixing and mastering that it was a no-brainer to let him do this record.
It sounds like you had a lot of faith in him to understand and capture the sound.
Oh, I definitely did. So he has another band. He has a side project, or they're a full band. They're rehearsing. They're called Thosella. And they play kind of a melodic death black metal thing. And he started working on that as soon as he got his home studio up and running. And then he sent me his first release. He wanted me to master it. And I was blown away at how good it sounded, how well it was recorded and mixed. And I did very little mastering to it. I just evened out the mix a little bit and boosted it. But I was just blown away at how good it was. And he sent me his working files in Reaper. That's what we record with. And everything was so well organized. And I was like, man, he really knows this program. So I knew then that like I could trust him with our album. So I have the utmost faith in him. I'm super, super, super proud of what he's done, what he's accomplished with his personal life. And I mean, he's been in this band for 16 years with me. He's been one of my best friends for longer than that. And he's young. He's only 31, I think. Yeah, he's only 31. And Derrik was born the same day the first Deicide album came out. So that's how we remember that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm super proud of what he's accomplished, and with sobriety and with music, with his own band, and with what he's done with producing music and what he's done for Father Befouled. So I'm so proud of him. I'm proud of this record.
So we spoke about this at the beginning of our conversation, but the kind of suffocating, claustrophobic, this dense sound that you have requires a very specific kind of production approach. Can you explain how you guys get that sound and what it is specifically you're looking for?
Yeah, part of it is we tune kind of low. We tune to A sharp, which is considerably lower than other bands of our ilk. And Incantation tunes to C, so we're a step and a half lower than them. So there's a lot of density to where we're writing at. You know, we take there's a lot of nuance to where our amps are set and distortion levels and reverb and the room sound and it all just goes hand in hand. I mean, I guess at this point we know what we sound like. So when we start recording, we aim for that. And if it's too bright or if it's too, it's too low, it can be too dense. I mean, there's a couple of mixes of the record where I was like, we've got to add some treble in here because it's too thick, it's too bass heavy. You know, we're not being a cavernous sounding band was not something that we ever aimed for. And I don't really like that tag of cavernous. If you look at something like Incantationcore, which is our doom, my death doom band, Incantationcore is cavernous. Incantationcore is just like a fucking black pit. And we're tuned even lower. We tuned to G sharp in that band. But Father Befouled we're a technical band. We play some intricate riffs. We're not technical like a progressive metal band, but we're really technical for the style of death metal we're playing. And I want that technicality to come through. I want you to hear the intricacy of what we're playing and the notes that we're playing. And so we have to find that balance of it sounding dark, but still sounding clear. Because if we're playing all these notes and all you're hearing is noise, it's not going to make any sense. And so there's a definite balance we're always looking for. So I want it to be as for there to be as much clarity as possible, but to retain that darkness.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. Father Befouled is not Impetuous Ritual or Portal or any of these bands that are almost impressionistic death metal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, just a wall of sound that you experience more than you listen to details.
Exactly. Like, I love Portal, and Portal is all about the way it just sits on your chest. Portal is like being trapped inside of a static TV or something. But it's definitely different from that. We're not a chaotic band. We're very deliberate in where our riffs go and where our songs go and how they're tied together and the transitions. And I don't, with Father Befouled songs, I don't want there to ever be a part where it feels like it's going off the rails. But we're not predictable. We're not linear. We have songs that never repeat riffs, but we have songs that are also, pretty standard in their structure. Everything's, it just depends on where the song goes when I'm writing it. But that balance between clarity and density is definitely something we're always looking for.
Do you want to say anything about Luc Fontaine, who mastered the album?
So he runs Cruciator Records and Cruciator Studio, and he did some reissues for us. He's put out 3 Father Befouled releases. He just reached out to me out of the blue one day. We had done that live album on tape, and I released that myself. And then he reached out to me and said, I'd love to put that on CD for you. So we came to an agreement and put it out on CD. And then he said, your first album's really hard to find. I'd love to put that out. He said, the Relapse album's getting hard to find. At that point, I had the rights back from Relapse. They had them for 10 years and they reverted to me. So he agreed to put out the Relapse, the Morbid Destitution record, and the Obscurus Next Cultus record on CD. So we've always been in contact there. We've had a great working relationship. And then I didn't even know that he did mixing and mastering. And he mentioned it to me one day. And he had mastered the new Drawn and Quartered album. And I thought it sounded fucking phenomenal. And I said, well, let's give it a shot. I wanted to, I've always loved Damian Herring. Damian did a great job with us for Morbid Destitution and Revulsion. Dan from Cruciamentum Resonance Sound Studio, he did a fantastic job with the last record with Desolate Gods and with Holy Rotten Blood. But I wanted to use someone different. I wanted to just have a different sound, we're new label, new band, new songs. I wanted, something different. And I think he nailed it. He kept Derrik's mix intact, but added the songs that clarity and that boost that they needed. I think he did a fucking fantastic job, and he was super easy to work with. Highly recommend him. I think it came out fantastic.
So by the time people hear this interview, the album will have been out for about 3 weeks. What are your plans for the future?
So right now we are working on our live set. We had a full practice last weekend. We are playing the album release show next Friday, or this coming Friday, the 15th. We have another show booked for the summer here in Atlanta as well. We're going to be support on that one for a couple of bands that are touring. And then, fingers crossed, all goes well, we're going back to Europe in August. We have postponed that twice now, but we're going to do a 10-day run in Europe. We're going to tour for a week and end at Killtown in Copenhagen. So right now that's our year. We're just going to rehearse and then play these shows, hopefully tour Europe. And at the end of the year, I don't know. I don't want to, it's been 5 years since the last record. It was 5 years before that for the one before it. So I don't know how long we will wait. I don't want to wait 5 years for another record, but I also don't want to rush a record. I'm so deliberate and focused on the details about Father Befouled. I don't want to put out something substandard. So we'll see what happens. We might have a stopgap. We might do an EP. We might do another split. There's no telling. So we'll see. We'll see what happens at the end of the year. We'll go from there.
So you're in a number of different projects, which hopefully I'll get to have you back on to talk about all of them. But I really enjoyed that Occult's record. I don't know if you want to say anything about what's happening with that band.
So Occult, that was, born out of me wanting to write music and not write Father Befouled songs, and hooked up with a couple of guys who wanted to do it with me. And we did those demos, and then we had recorded the album, and we're just kind of sitting on it. And I didn't know who was going to release it. And when I started talking to ESR about Father Befouled, they asked me, what else is going on? What else is active? And I said, well, I have an Occult album done. And they were like, well, let's put it out. If it's ready, let's do it. And shit, we had it out. A month later, it was out. And the vinyl is in production now, because vinyl's taking a fucking year right now. But we are going to put out both of the demos on CD on Everlasting Spew with a bonus track. We recorded a new song a couple months ago. So that is in process. I have to finish the layout and send it to the album, to the label. So yeah, Occult is still around. We will hopefully do something next year or into this year. I don't know. Might do an EP or something. I don't want to just jump into another record. So for now, there's going to be that demo compilation coming out. But that's a fun band. That's definitely it scratches an itch when I'm writing death metal songs. Whereas there's definite lines that I follow with Father Befouled, it's way more open for Occult. I can get a little more creative with some of the Occult stuff.
Very cool. And whenever you have that new album ready to go out, expect an email from me.
Absolutely.
So, are you ready? I'm gonna have to warm up to this. Crowned in Veneficum. Hey,
yep.
I got it. Is out now through Everlasting Spew Records. Justin, how can people order this album, and what's the best way to get it?
If you're in Europe, please get it from Everlasting Spew. You can buy it from their site, everlastingspew.com, or their Bandcamp page, which I think is everlastingspewrecords.bandcamp.com, or just Google it. Right now, you can get the CD in America. You can get it from us, from our Bandcamp page, fatherbefouled.bandcamp.com. It's starting to show up in distros. I know that Night Shift has it. If you want to get it through Night Shift, you can also get Father Befouled merch from Night Shift. And then I'm sure it's going to be in all the regular distros sooner or later. So
now, is there going to be a vinyl version of this album?
Yep. Vinyl's at press. And we expect it hopefully end of summer, somewhere in there, fall. Vinyl is taking 8 to 10 months right now. So it is at press, though. I know that the test presses have come back. So it's moving along. And there's also a cassette release. I haven't put them on our Bandcamp page, but we have cassettes as well that'll be up on our Bandcamp by the time this comes out.
And if people want to follow Father Befouled online and keep up to date with what you're doing and get tour dates and stuff like that, what's the best way to follow you guys?
Our Facebook page, I guess it's facebook.com/Father Befouled. We have an Instagram, which is at Father Befouled. I try to keep them both updated, but that's the only two places. We don't have a website anymore, but anything that is going on is going to be on our Facebook page.
Excellent. Is there anything else you want to say? You've been extremely generous with your time, by the way.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad I was able to do it. I appreciate it. I appreciate people that listen to our band and support us. We're not a big band. We're not making any money off of this. We're not making a living off of this, but we do it for the passion of playing the music. I'm passionate about metal music. It's all I've listened to I listen to all kinds of music, but metal has been my passion since I was a child. And I remember being obsessed with Def Leppard when I was 7 years old. And Guns N' Roses and Metallica, and just it went from there. But I do it for the passion of playing music, and if we're playing a show to one fucking person and they're into it, I'm happy. And the messages we get about the album, the reviews we've been getting, it's just so validating that people really appreciate what we're doing, and especially going out and playing shows. And We went to Europe 2 years ago or 3 years ago. The reaction we got from people in Europe just fucking floored me. People that were so excited to see our band. And it blows me away that we've been doing this for so long now. Like, it's funny, when we started Father Befouled and I got into Incantation, they had been around as long as we're around now. So we're definitely like at a point in our career. If Father Befouled we're a real band. I mean, I never knew that was going to happen. I never knew it was going to last like this. And there's no reason now for it to not keep lasting. So I'm going to keep doing it as long as we can, as long as we're able. So as long as people want to hear us, we're going to keep doing it. And I appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Justin.
You're very welcome. I appreciate the support and reaching out to me. I love doing interviews like this. It's so much more than email interviews. So I like talking about my band and talking about music.